In this podcast, we chat about the defeat to Preston, changes Carrick has made already. We look ahead to Hull and answer your podcast questions. This is the Boro Breakdown podcast, and this is our Boro Matchday Chatter in a pod.
Wants support. Curtis Fleming is there on the edge of the area. Fleming for Craig Hignett. Hit it, Higgy. Higgy hits the goal!
Avenelli coming alive again. Janino wants the ball played to him. Avenelli spots out Emerson!
Hello and welcome to the Boro Breakdown podcast with Jonny, Dana and Tom. We are the Boro podcast that gives you all of your Boro Matchday Chatter in a podcast. And this week, a late goal from John Story gave Michael Carrick his first defeat in charge as Boro manager and sent Boro to 21st in the championship table, just outside the relegation zone on goals for. Guys, how are you feeling in 3 words? Dana, do you want to go first?
I think my 3 words are "for God's sake," and if I could say something stronger, I would, but I can't, so I'll leave it at "for God's sake." But just predictable again, set pieces. 4 of the last 5 goals that we've conceded have been from set piece situations, and only Bristol City have conceded more set piece goals than us now. We've conceded 8, they've conceded 11. It's just incredibly poor. And you know what, when that winner went in yesterday, there was a tinge of disappointment, but the main overriding feeling was just acceptance. And we spoke about it in previous podcast episodes, that you just accept it now, don't you? It's like you either have an opposition that pile about 4 or 5 players on Zach Steffen because he's somewhat vulnerable from crosses into the box, or you have a man peeling around the back post, nodding it back in, and Boro don't deal with the second phase. Yeah, it's getting really boring and tiresome now, isn't it? So, yeah, just for God's sake.
God's sake. Tom, what are your 3 words? You had a DEEPDALE yesterday, big night on the night as well. So,
get your wig out, Tom.
No, it's over the other side of the room now. My 3 words: we were robbed. I don't feel like that was a fair reflection on the match at all by the end. Obviously, we've done it to ourselves and shot ourselves in the foot yet again. But they just didn't look dangerous at any point during that game other than the 2 set pieces that they scored it off. And you could tell, obviously, it was mentioned on the opposition preview show by Ben the other day that, they've not scored. They've scored 2 goals at home all year. Emil Rees is the only player to get more than 1 goal for them, and you could tell that in their fans because we went 1-0 up and we were singing, "Shall we sing a song for you" and stuff like that, and taking the mick. There was nothing coming from the Preston fans. It just seemed like acceptance of where they were. And I almost felt bad for them at times. And then they come back and score 2. And I was like, they've not deserved that at all. So, yes, somehow the car ride back yet again for an away day took about 8 hours. Or at least it felt like it after another display. But at least I got to see a goal this time. But, yeah, it just wasn't a fair reflection on the game at all.
At least I got to see a goal. Scraping the barrel or what?
Well, you know what? I say I got to see a goal. I was in the front row behind our goal in the first half. So that was literally as far away from me as it could possibly be. I didn't even know it was Akpom that had scored it because there was so many people in the way of it.
Kind of reminds me of when I went to Blackburn away many moons ago under Tony Mowbray, and it was really foggy, the game. And I didn't see Middlesbrough score because the fog was that bad. Not only anyone knew we scored until we started seeing the players starting running around.
So you said no one had the foggiest then?
Yeah, no one had the foggiest clue. And then obviously their 2 goals at the end. It was in I think 89th and 91st minute or something. And yeah, we barely seen that as well. And that was right our end as well. And the fog was horrendous. And then my phone broke as well on the way home. So what a horrendous away day that was. So, Tom, I'll come to the atmosphere and stuff in a second, but I think my 3 words is I really like shape is my 3 words. Is that really boring? I just saw Boro's shape yesterday was really nice, and in that 4-2-3-1 and that 4-4-2 defensive. defensive line, and I'll come up with that in probably a second. But I just really like that shape, and I was like, oh, that's quite good. I mean, if you want to put your standpoint on the team, have good shape, and I quite like that. But defeat otherwise was just horrendous, and I just wanted to have a bit of positivity before we go into the game itself. But there's no Jonny's happy place, just because there was nothing to be happy about apart from being dressed as men in black last night at the Halloween party. But we'll move on to the game, Tom, because yesterday, well, you seen Boro score, you didn't see them take the lead, but what was the game and atmosphere like for you at DEEPDALE yesterday?
It was pretty decent. I mean, I should have known how the game was going to go the second I saw someone eating pie, gravy, and pickled cabbage in a social club right before us, because I was absolutely disgusted, to be honest. And I just thought, things are only going to go downhill from there after seeing that. But
Chris Wilder sneaking into a pie there.
Yeah, pint of bitter next to it as well. Disgusting. But yeah, I mean, the atmosphere was pretty good. Everyone seemed pretty optimistic. Like the fans felt lifted from the way we have been recently. Going into the game, I saw a tweet saying a man like Carrick was getting a rendition at the train station, and I was like, "Oh my god, am I actually gonna hear this? Like, I'm gonna hear like fans who've been on the drink all day actually managing to sing this." And yeah, it never got sung. It was We've Got Super Michael Carrick, and then Jonny Woodgate got a chant as well, which I thought was a really good touch from the fans. But no, it did seem like a renewed bit of optimism. Then the game happened. I mean, obviously we went 1-0 up fairly early on, and the atmosphere was still absolutely cracking after that. And I don't know, it did seem like a bit of a sucker punch, their first goal. And then their fans got into it a little bit more. So overall, the atmosphere in the second half did die down because there wasn't too much going on. But it was a pretty decent game to watch. I think from our perspective, I would say that performance was improved from where we have been recently. I think at least we looked like we had a system that we were trying to stick to. I just think some of our players that do need a bit more confidence. For example, I thought Riley McGree had a really good game yesterday, but there were a couple of examples right in front of in front of me where he could have took his man on and had a shot, or could have just shot from the angle where he was, and it was too indecisive. And by the time he'd kind of figured out what he wanted to do, that chance was gone. So I think it's a good start, even though we did lose 2-1. I'm not too worried because none of our managers ever win their first game. So, but yeah, I think it's a good start. We've just got some work to do in continuing to lift the players' confidence and just kind of getting this system, getting used to it, really.
Yeah, because we did change system, and we'll come to that in just a moment. But Dana, how would you assess things on your end?
You know what? I thought the first half there were some promising signs. He put Akpom on Ben Whiteman, and a lot of Preston fans have said that a lot of their players funneled through Ben Whiteman. So the fact that Akpom was in that deeper position, basically restricting that build out from that midfield area, was really good. I thought in the first half he did a number on him, and he really limited the impact that Ben Whiteman had on that game, because he had to contend with Akpom offensively as well. And we'll go on to Akpom later, because I thought he was superb throughout that game. But yeah, the midfield in possession was a lot braver, I thought. I thought they were a lot more decisive with their possession play. Howson and Hackney were really good in receiving the ball and then releasing it quite quickly. And I thought we had a much better zip about our play midfield. It did revert back to the kind of slow and pedestrian and indecisive pattern that we've seen earlier on this season in the second half. But the first half, I thought there was some really good signs. And yeah, the shape as well was really good. We'll speak about it in a second, but I just had a point on maybe a potential weakness that I think we were quite lucky that Preston didn't really catch us out too much with. But if you look at some of the build-ups that Preston had, it was that big switch. It was either going to be that big switch or a set piece that was going to undo Boro. And the way that we were really condensed and narrowed in that midfield in particular, Jones was very tucked in there. It basically meant that Alvaro Fernandez on that on that left side was free. And we saw a few times Whiteman or somebody in midfield would basically switch it out to the wide area. There would be so much space for Preston to be able to get in behind and have that double up on that far side. There was a few times where they did kind of get through, and it's just, I think we were lucky because Preston weren't quick enough with it at times. It was on quite a few occasions, that big switch, and they just didn't really move the ball quick enough. So although I did like our shape, I thought that was a potential weakness, and definitely something to keep an eye on, because against a side that are a lot better in possession from open play, I think that might catch us out a few times.
Yeah, and I think it kind of reminded me a little bit of like that. Do you know, I've seen like how a lot of Red Bull type teams, or you can look at Leeds, for example, if you're ready for this, and how they counter press and how they use narrowness in the pitch to try and create opportunities from themselves. It was quite it seemed to me that Boro adopted that ever so slightly, because when you're playing like half and half system, you want to try and occupy your own space, but then the counter is the probably the biggest part of it, where probably the weakness that you'll find from it. And we've seen obviously Boro introduced that yesterday, but also the 4-2-3-1, Tom, the formation that did Boro so well under Aitor Carrick in the promotion winning season. And then obviously we moved to a 4-4-2 when we didn't have the ball. So how do you think we managed in that system yesterday? Do you feel a lot more comfortable seeing Boro in that?
I feel a little bit comfortable seeing us in that. I think there are some changes to be made. As I said earlier, I thought Ryan McGree played well. Kind of playing as a left attacking mid rather than like a left winger. But then we had Jones playing as a winger on the other side, and I didn't think he had a good game at all. So one change I would possibly like to see in that formation is Watmore brought in instead of Jones. I think he could probably suit that right attacking mid role quite well. And, I mean, Jones, he seems to be having second season syndrome a little bit. He's, getting doubled and tripled up on at times. And it seems like fullbacks and wingers kind of really know what he's going to do. So maybe, rotating him in and out of the team for a while. If he's coming off the bench, I'm sure he could have still a massive impact if he's fresh and the fullbacks aren't. So I think that's something you could potentially do there. And then I was thinking about it on the way back from the game yesterday. I'm just, the players that we've got, it does still seem like we might need to recruit more players to fit into this formation now if we're going to stick with it, which I don't mind so much, because I don't think it's too much that's needed. Even though he had a good game yesterday, personally, I wouldn't be playing Chuba Akpom as a 10. I'd have moved him a bit further up, and you'd be wanting someone kind of more like Lee Tomlin, Gaston Ramirez type in that 10. Even Diego Fabrini, if we're just listening 10s that we had under Aitor. But someone who can pick that pass and unlock the defence. I don't think that's Akpom, even though, like I say, I did think he played really well yesterday. I thought his ball carrying was excellent, and he drew fouls quite often, which worked in our favour. Also, in the first half, really good to see us actually shooting from a direct free kick chance, even when McGree did it at the wall. Because far too many times, in the last couple of months, we've seen them just trying to dink it into the box from there, and it's ended up going absolutely nowhere. So happy to see us kind of shooting from there. But it does seem like it's got some positive stuff to build on, this formation. I'm not going to totally judge it after one game, but I think there are improvements to be made to it.
You were sitting there around Isaiah Jones and him having more like a second season syndrome. Do you think that Boro's lopsidedness to that right hand side is kind of forcing that a little bit?
I mean, it shouldn't be, because we've got Giles now as an attacking threat on the left, and even with yesterday, I'd say McGree is more of an attacking threat than he is, solid at defending. So we should be able to use both quite effectively. But I have noticed it in a lot of games this season where as soon as Jones gets the ball, there's 3 of their players on that side blocking him off, and they always kind of know what he's going to do. He's going to hang on to the ball, try and look for an opening. If he doesn't get one, it seems like his composure goes a little bit and he just tries to run past him. And there was a couple of times yesterday in particular where he just ran into the fullback and lost the ball in a pretty decent area. The way I see a 4-2-3-1 formation working is that we should be able to create chances with overlapping fullbacks as well, where I think Smith and Giles should be pretty good in that formation, especially Giles with the delivery he's got. So we shouldn't have to rely on Jones as much as we do. So I don't know if it's maybe just a confidence thing for him now that, what he's trying isn't coming off in more cases than not, but that's why I think rotation in and out of the team could be beneficial. Because I feel like if you have someone like Watmore there for 60 minutes doing a lot of running, tiring the defenders out, you bring Jones on for the last half hour, and he's going to have much more effect there, being fresh against a player who's already played an hour, and I think Watmore could play that position equally as well.
Mm. And just with that as well, I think when you're saying around Giles at left back, we could maybe, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, Dana, but maybe put Bowler in at left back, Giles left wing, and then you could maybe have Isaiah Jones on that right hand side or Watmore. What do you think? Do you think that could potentially work?
Yes, but I'd be worried about depth. I think one of the issues that we had when the transfer window closes was looking at that midfield depth. And I still think in a 4-2-3-1, you've got more. And you've got Howson, and you've got, I don't know, could Hackney play as a 6 potentially, but I think midfield is still a little bit of a depth issue, and then you've got a depth issue out wide as well, because yes, you can have Watmore and Jones on the right, or Watmore and Giles on the left, but there's just not enough. We didn't build the squad in the summer for 4 at the back and for wingers. You can say that Giles is a winger and Jones is a winger, but they've been played as wing backs for the past God knows how many seasons for Giles, and certainly last season for Jones. So we didn't recruit for a 4 at the back, so I'm not sold on it. It's easy to say that it's shown signs of being good and being effective, but we have played some crap teams in recent weeks. And don't get me wrong, we are a crap team in ourselves, so this is not me being bitter or anything like that, but I would like to see that 4 at the back be tested against a better team. So the jury's still out on the 4 for me. There's different variations of what we could do in terms of personnel. I do like Watmore as a sort of wide forward more than a central forward, but for me, I still think we recruited for a 3 at the back. Why are we abandoning it? I know that the options we have right now are not being effective. They're not playing well enough. But it's typical Boro to press the panic button and to rip everything up. I know we've got to be flexible. We've got to be versatile. When something's not working, you do have to question whether or not you go forward and move forward with it. But I think we stick to the 3, and I think we make it work because we've recruited for it. And you're thinking about recruiting for a 4 at the back and wingers. It's just going to be a rebuild. What we are now, Jonny, rebuild 10.0 or something.
Yeah,
it's not sustainable.
I was going to say the last article I wrote, I think, was about 5.0, I think. So maybe it's probably
that was 2018, wasn't it?
I don't know. I wrote one quite similar around having structure in the football. Yeah. So this could be maybe you could probably not wrong. Then it probably is 10.0 by now. But I think when you were saying that, then around obviously the why change to a 4 now we've got a 3. But yesterday, did you notice any differences from the previous regime in terms of patterns of play, tactical flexibility? Was there anything that you noticed or picked up on?
I think the build out from midfield was good. We actually played some good football in terms of building it out from the back at times in that first half. And we evaded the press really well. We looked comfortable in that situation. But then there were other times where Dale Fry in particular was a big culprit of being poor in possession. The first goal that we conceded, I don't know whether the first goal is worse than the second or the second is worse than the third, because the first goal is so sloppy from us building out from the back. It's just a really poor and undersold square ball to Jonny House, and I think it's Ali McCann steals in, nips it, wins the foul. But I think, ignoring that, overall in the first half, I thought the midfield was a lot better in terms of receiving the ball and being able to release it quite quickly and get up the pitch with momentum rather than sort of being a bit staggered and slow and pedestrian. But I can say that, but then in the second half, it was really poor quality, and I thought that we went back to typical old Boro that we've seen this season, being slow, being pedestrian, being predictable, and it was a very poor quality second 45 minutes. But there was that, the shape out of possession as well, being narrow, being compact. Carrick needs to make Boro hard to break down, and Preston probably isn't the team to be able to judge that, because from open play, even though they had a higher open play XG than us yesterday, still don't feel like they were necessarily sharp in front of goal or sharp in creating those open play chances. So I would probably say, the what's paramount in his in-tray is firstly to sort out those set pieces, but also make Boro really difficult to break down. And I think that shape, promising signs from that, I think.
I think that's why we did move to a 4-2-3-1/4-4-2 yesterday. I think it was just around making us more difficult to be broken down. I think over like the last few games this season, we have seen Boro get caught out quite a lot in that three, mainly just due to probably our high wingers, and then also losing it in really key areas of the pitch. And I think yesterday, when we moved to a 4-4-2, when we didn't have the ball, it kind of allows you to have more control of the play, and then also gives you a compact shape. So then it's quite difficult for teams to try and play through you, and it forces them out wide. But then also that kind of feeds into the press as well, because you force the press into like wide areas, and it allows you to counter attack probably much more effectively. And you've seen that in the second half, where we were able to we had a nice little compact shape, and then when they put the bodies forward and we were able to break. But the problem we had is we just didn't have the pace to get up the pitch or try and drive ourselves forward. But then when we did, we played the ball back. We tried to rebuild again. And I think sometimes you just need to kind of take that out of your system a little bit, because it's too robotic. But sometimes you can learn, especially when your coach starts to build more into the team and build more confidence. You'll be able to have that shot on goal, or you're able to recycle possession more effectively. But sometimes it could be a little bit quicker when you do counter attack. I just don't think we were yesterday, which was a bit of a shame. But I mean, I think it was still positive, and we were harder to break down yesterday, I thought, in game ones. But when we're looking at possession of the play and trying to build out, be a bit more crisp, try and have a bit more tempo in your pass, and also don't try and do a hospital ball just where you've got with no man behind you. Dale Fry, don't do it. Just get rid. And I think we just need to keep working on that. It's going to be a long process, but I think trying to play out from the back with a person like Dale Fry, and Dale Fry is good, but I think he's not a ball playing centre half. For me, I think he's definitely a kicker. It's quite similar to Lenihan a little bit, where I'm not fully sold on them defensively playing up from the back, which is why I prefer Matt Clark in that position. But if we are to play that system, I think Matt Clark probably jumps in front of Dale Fry for that reason alone. But if we start to build out a little bit more, then I like to see that. But going back to the shape, I thought the 4-4-2 worked quite well yesterday. But is what it is. We had a defeat and we move on. But Tom, I want to talk about Chuba Akpom for a moment, because I thought he was marvellous yesterday in that number 10 that number 10 role really in the hole, and then he also played up top as well. How impressed have you been with Chuba this season? Because you're not out from the cold, and he's been putting in some really good performances, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he looks better now than he did when he first came to the club. Absolutely. I thought his ball carrying yesterday was excellent. Drawn fouls, and something I have noticed this season from what he's been doing, he's been using his physicality quite well, and being able to hold up the ball and lay it off to people. So coming in from the calls. As you mentioned, he hasn't been around the team for what, is it like a year and a half or just a year or something? I can't remember the last time I saw him play before this season, but he's done extremely well. And considering he hadn't trained with the team in pre-season or anything like that, he came in looking like he had a point to prove, and he looks better now than his first season here, where I'll be honest, I really wasn't sold on him, but I feel like now we're seeing why we signed him. And, I think he's in the team on merit.
And just with keeping with Akpom, he did give the foul away for the goal. The one probably bad thing that he did yesterday. But I mean, you can't really blame him too much. He was in a bad area of the pitch. But should we talk about the Preston win? I feel like we should. Then it all starts in that build-up, I guess.
Yeah, it does. It is Akpom that concedes that free kick. It's a late tackle from him on Ryan Ledson, but it's really a bit of a domino effect of Boro losing duels. So the first one, it's a free kick put into the 18-yard box by Preston. It's a long free kick, but before their second free kick that results in the winner is even won, Boro do lose an aerial duel between Lenihan and Ched Evans. It seems like Lenihan gets caught under the ball a little bit, and what this allows is for Ched Evans to get the ball down. He passes it to Emil Rees, and this is where we lose the second duel as well. Mort has a few bites at Emil Rees, who, to be fair to him, does retain the ball really well, uses his physicality, uses his body well, but in that situation, I think Moet just has to be a bit stronger, to be honest. He tries to go in once, he tries to go in twice, and he just doesn't win the ball. So that's the second duel that we lost. And then, of course, Akpom fouls Ryan Ledson, which leads to a very, very poor winner conceded. It's just going back to basically Boro shooting themselves in the foot and that narrative. We did it for the first goal. We conceded that free kick, which again, talk about having sort of bite to the cherry, trying to win possession or clear it. The amount of opportunities we had to clear it, we didn't. The second one, the amount of opportunities we had to win the ball back, we didn't. Then we give a free kick away for both situations. So it's poor play and really avoidable as well.
And then the free kick happens, Tom, the build-up and the setup of it. We've seen a couple of times this season, Jones has been the one that's been left stranded ever so slightly on that right-hand side. Do you think we should maybe chop and change this a little bit?
Yeah, I do. I think we've got an image here of before the free kick and how it looks. You can see there at the back post, got Jones and Akpom lining up to mark a couple of players there, Liam Lindsay being one of them, and Giles is the one-man wall. Personally, I would swap Giles with Jones. I don't think defensive marking, especially on set pieces, is necessarily Jones's strong point. I'm starting to get kind of real flashbacks to Jed Spence, and I think it was his second season, maybe the end of his first, where he was just allowing a lot of goals at the back post from not tracking his man, because I don't think that's his strength either. I'm not necessarily saying Jones or Jed Spence are bad players. It's just they offer more going forwards than they do defensively. I think Ryan Giles is better defensively than Isaiah Jones, which it is saying something considering when we signed Giles, we were looking at like strengths and stuff from stats from last year, and in terms of defensive duels and stuff like that really wasn't his strong point, but I still think it's better than Jones. So I feel like you swap those two on set pieces. But what I also noticed yesterday from again, one of the only positives view-wise from where I was sat was in the first half when we were seeing us line up to defend corners. It did seem like we were setting up zonally, and I don't think it works for us. There was a point in the first half where Riley McGree was lining up and marking Emil Rees at the start, who was also trying to mark Stefan. And then you've got Lenihan and Fry, who weren't particularly marking anyone at that point, but kind of marking the edge of the 6-yard box. I don't think it works. I think it leaves us quite vulnerable. I think I'd prefer to see us go man for man on set pieces, and then you have some accountability in the team. It just seems like that was something we used to do pretty well, and it's changed this season, and I don't think it's working for us at the moment.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. And I think when we look at like the man-to-man stuff, we talk about accountability. I want to look at like Boro's defensive line a lot because when you look at the shape that Boro are in, where before the ball's coming in, you've got Akpom and Isaiah Jones right at the end of the defensive line. And when you're looking at that, I look at Isaiah Jones and thinking, why aren't you at the end of this line, and why are you a yard in front? And why is Akpom marking you? And why are you marking Lindsay when not even looking at Lindsay? You just stood there and you're just looking at Brown behind you. And I'm thinking, surely, I think when you're looking at probably Lenahan, you're looking at Fry, and they're probably all saying who's marking who, get in new shape, try and make it difficult. Because if Jones takes about two yards back and goes into that defensive line with Akpom, you do stop this run which Lindsay does make. And I think where the ball comes over the top, Jones himself completely loses Lindsay altogether, spins off the back of him. And this is where he comes into a really nice space where Boro have completely lost two men at the back post. And this is very, very similar. If you watch Boro's goals conceded this year, a lot of the goals that we've conceded have been from the back post, getting headed back into the centre, and then the team goes on to score. So was that show its accountability,
Blackburn as
but
well,
also
wasn't it? Blackburn
exactly.
conceded the same.
Exactly. And we need to have a look at that, and we look at that defensive shape, that defensive line, accountability, and you're just thinking, right, if we're weak at set piece here, maybe we do bring our line back a little bit more if we want to play a little bit deeper. Yes, okay, that kind of. I think we'll play a very high line there because I don't think we're very comfortable of Stefan's catching ability. Maybe I'm not too sure, but in terms of where Jones should be, he needs to be on the edge of that box, and it really does stop Lindsay's run coming in the back post as well. And maybe Tom, like you were saying there, if you put Giles there or you put Alex Moore in at the end of that, I think it does. I think it becomes quite limited in terms of what he can do, but he does get the ball at the end of the back post there, and Hayden Hackney seems to lose his man.
He does, yeah. He's marking Jordan's story when you see the defensive line is set or getting set, getting prepared. He's with Jordan's story. So that is obviously the eventual goal scorer. And then if you watch the goal back, you will see that Hackney is tracking him. And then all of a sudden he just stops. And what that leaves his story in a decent amount of space up against Boro centre halves who at that point were ball watching or watching the ball come into the area, and he seems to get just a couple of yards to basically leap on Darragh Lenihan, who at that point is up against two players there in Ched Evans and in Jordan Story. And I just feel like if Hayden Hackney just continues to track Jordan Story in that situation, then at least that advantageous, is that the right pronunciation? Anyway, that situation where it's more in favour of Preston is probably levelled out a little bit and at least fairer in Boro's favour as well. But it just leaves him, and it's just that decision. You know, you talk about Jones there switching off. I think Hackney switches off as well, and all of a sudden there's just this really bad domino effect where if one person switches off, it basically just ruins the whole sort of set piece for Boro. And talking about advantages, it gives Preston that advantage, and he leaps higher than Lenihan, who again seems to get caught under the ball, but it's not really his fault because he's literally
2v1, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a 2v1 there, that situation. It's just, yeah, it's so poor again, so avoidable. You've got players that are just not tracking their men, having men peeling off the back of them. It's it's poor.
And I like the sign off of the analysis there. Dana was saying, "Pass me the gin." The malt cursed gin is available in selected stores from Christmas. But in terms of the defeat, then I think another defeat on the road for Boro, 7 defeats so far this season. Do you think we deserve to lose the game in the end?
Based on that shoddy free kick marking, then yes. But in terms of the game as a whole, I think a draw would have been a fair result, to be honest. Both teams took their opportunity in Akpom and then in Emil Rees, who, by the way, absolutely took the net off, didn't he? Talk about typical Boro. You had the former summer target scoring against us. You had a set piece goal conceded, a late winner. Yeah, it was pretty impressive as far as typical Boro goes, but I think a draw would have been a fair result. I don't think Preston fans could have complained about it, and I don't think Boro fans could have complained about it as well.
Okay, then. Well, let's move on to questions then, because every week you get to send us a question via Twitter, email at borobreakdown@hotmail.com, or join our Telegram chat as well with over 300 Boro fans talking everything but Boro. And those questions can be, Jonny, what do you think about Elon Musk taking over Twitter? Or Jonny, where do you think's the best chips and gravy is? Or Dana, where did you get your tattoo from? But we're going to talk about football this week. And first question is from Jonathan. He says, what do you see as the main defensive issues and how can they be resolved? Tom, would you take this one?
Set pieces. I think that's an easy one. I think getting rid of the set piece goals from yesterday, or the season so far, we'd be in a much better position. We'd have won yesterday if we knew how to mark on set pieces. So I think it's that, and I think it's literally the matter of changing from zonal marking to man marking. I think you do that and you eliminate a lot of the problems that we've already had this season.
Yeah, on the set players especially. I think you couldn't do the man marking system in open play. I think we've seen that under Neil Warnock, and we got absolutely annihilated.
Apart from against Norwich, so maybe we should do that again against Norwich and Daniel Fisher's coming back, isn't he? So you got Daniel Fisher against Todd Cantwell, the sequel.
Yeah, so there we go. I mean, what a way for him to come back. Do you know what I mean? No, Todd Cantwell's is he back? Is he at Bournemouth now?
He's at Norwich.
Is that back at Norwich?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought he moved permanently, but oh well. In terms of the set players, because that kind of leads quite nicely to the second question, because from Smoggy Balboa, not related to Rocky, I don't think, but he's why can't we defend set players? We know where our biggest problems are as fans. How is not the main thing that's being worked on at Rockcliffe? And if it is being worked on at Rockcliffe, why aren't we seeing the evidence on match day? Dana, why can't we defend set players?
God knows. I think it's what Tom said there, set pieces, but within that, I think it's concentration during set pieces, because we discussed there switching off, Jones switching off, Hackney switching off. All it takes is one player to switch off, and then all of a sudden it's those dominoes fall against you. And I'm sure the players are working on it, but in game we have to be more savvy. We have to be smarter in those situations. I think we aren't at the moment, and it's so infuriating, isn't it? Because that's the 8th set piece goal we've conceded this season, and that figure is only going to grow. And we said that in a thread on Twitter before the game. It grew, 2 in 1 game. I don't know, to be honest. I'm at a loss. I'm baffled. Someone on BBC T's called in and said baffled about 10 times, and it was a big mood because, we know it's a problem. They know it's a problem. Carrick knows it's a problem. And yet it still pops up during games. It's, Carrick has his work cut out there.
Yeah, I think with Boro, it's getting the simple things right. And you've got to try and build on it. That has to be your foundation as a team. You've got to, either it's from like passing, like simple tempo or control of a game, or just little things, like communication, little things like that. What can we do to try and improve on that, and trying to use that as a foundation to really build on? I think Karanka's and Warnock's team was all built on doing the basic things right, and then trying to build on that. Pretty sure under Warnock, I don't think we could build on the basics, but I think with Karanka we did, and it's kind of proved with quality over time. We started to really pick up the results. But in terms of
the basics, the basics are always overlooked, or often overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
We put that video up earlier this week about Michael Carrick on the training ground talking about opening up the pitch and space, space. And people were saying, "Oh, this is under 12 stuff." Yes, but it's also things that are overlooked, because football is built on those basics, and the very best teams do the basics right. So yes, it is very simple stuff, but some teams just don't hack it as much. So it's good that he's going back to basics, because that's what Boro need. We haven't been doing them well enough. Those little nitty-gritty parts of football that are often fogged by the intricacies of the game and overcomplicated. We need to get the basics right first and foremost before we can really move on to that sort of level of stuff.
No, I fully agree. I fully agree, but it will take time. I mean, you can never do too much of the basics, to be honest. You've got to really try and master that, and and try and build from there. But the next question is from Chris. He says, "Where's Matt Clark?" And it's a massive 10 days for us as well. Matt Clark is still injured. I don't know when he's back. Actually, I think it's next 2 weeks. I think they were saying so. We'll see on that one. But it is a massive 10 days for us. Going to Hull on Tuesday night is a massive game for us. We have to try and pick something up from them. We'll break that down in just a moment. But the next question is from Nick, and he says, "What's happened to Dale Fry?" Tom, what has happened to Dale Fry?
I don't know in what context. No, I don't think he's been really an issue this season. I think everyone goes on about him like a ball-playing centre-back. I don't think he ever has been that. And I think he's worked better in the last few games when we've moved to a 4, and he's been in the back two with a centre-back pairing with Lenihan. I don't think he's necessarily one of the biggest issues that we have. I mean, fair enough, he gave that absolute hospital ball to cost the set piece for the first goal yesterday, but I think other than that, he's been fairly solid.
I thought he was poor yesterday. I thought his passing was... it weren't great, was it? And it did put Boro into difficult positions. It's funny, actually, because he actually had the most amount of accurate passes of Boro's backline yesterday, yet he had the lowest passing accuracy percentage. But yeah, it was a mixed afternoon for him. I thought he did struggle yesterday in terms of trying to build out from that defensive area. He's a good defender. I do like Dale Fry. I'm not going to get it twisted and say that he's rubbish end of because he had a poor game playing out from the back yesterday. I think he's a good defender. I think he's a very good defender. I've seen a few people saying that he's just an average mid-table championship defender. I personally don't agree. I think he's at a better level than that. However, in terms of ball playing, he is not. And I said that last podcast and I'll reiterate it. He's not a ball playing defender. So yeah, those big long balls upfield is so annoying because they never go anywhere. They're so aimless and he's got to stop that. But he's a good defender. I do like Fry.
It does leave Muniz with a lot to do. I noticed that yesterday. He was playing a long ball forward down the right-hand side quite a lot, and Muniz was having to make a run pretty much from centre to go and challenge the Preston player on that right-hand side for a header and try and bring it down. Personally, not a big fan of that. I mean, I think short passing, if you just give it to someone who can pass the ball and kind of do your defensive work, I think he'll be absolutely sound.
But wouldn't it be great if we had somebody like a deep lying playmaker that can play those balls that Dale Fry is trying? Talk about midfield roles. We don't have a ball carrier. We don't really have a ball winner. And I think we need improvement in that sort of 8/10 hybrid as well. So there's work to do in midfield that I think would take some of the work off the defence as well, both in possession and out of it.
I would say Dale Fry could be a playmaker. I think when he took the ball on the half turn yesterday and played it round, did a nice little forward run. I was like, I absolutely love that. I mean, so that it could be the ball playing Dale Fry, but he's just in the wrong position. He should be playing up front instead. But the next question we've got is from Mike. He says, "What would you say our chances are of actually going down this season?" Dana Malt, what is our chances of going down?
Well, the way that we played, it's probably inevitable, right? No, I think that would be wetting the bed a little bit. I mean, I understand why people are worried because let's be honest, this isn't just a 2 or 3 game thing. This is what 17. Are we 17 games in now or something? It's been a significant problem. Boro aren't getting the basics right. We are poor defensively. We are leaking possession in midfield. We're giving the ball away sloppily, and I think going forward, there's a little bit of a disconnect there. I thought Giles was poor yesterday in his attacking. Still, he's got fantastic deliveries, and that you'll never be able to take that away from Ryan Giles. But yeah, the wing backs are a lot less effective, and Muniz is struggling a little bit as well. He's got more yellow cards in the past, God knows how many games than goals. I think his last 8 games, he's got 2 yellow cards and 0 goals, so that's not great. But there is a particular stat from Andy Watson, who's been on this podcast before discussing Lenihan. Teams that finish 7th tend to have a huge drop-off the season after. And actually, the last club to finish 7th in the Championship and go on to improve their position in the following season was Swansea in 2010-2011. So there's been a few from Leeds, Boro in there twice. Bolton, Reading, Wolves, Ipswich, Leeds again, Preston and Forest, they've all had a significant drop off. The worst one for Boro was the Woodgate season, where, of course, before that we had finished 7th and then went on to finish 17th in 2019-20. So, yeah, it's, I think that's a bloody brilliant stat from Andy there. Some fantastic work to find that, but maybe be worried, Boro fans, because it seems like teams that finish 7th, it's a bit of a poisoned chalice the next season.
Well, it leads quite nicely at last question, that, Dana, because Tom O'Downey said, if someone offered you, say, 15th in the league now, would you take it? So, Dana, would you take 15th?
Of course, because it means we stay in the division. I mean, I said I don't care about league position anymore, just as long as we see some progression of, players getting back to their near best and, the younger players coming through, I'd take 15th.
Tom, would you take 15th?
No. I personally, I want to see us win as many games as possible. I'm never going to be of the opinion that I don't think like league position matters in the season. I obviously want us to improve as a team. I want Carrick to make this team better and a lot more cohesive. But at the same time, I want to see us finish as high up the league as possible. So like I think after 17 games, it'd be a bit defeatist of me to say I'd take 15th now. I want to see us finish as high as possible.
Well, we do have a rookie manager. I think, obviously, the situation is that he's going to make mistakes. I think this Boro team are going to make mistakes because he's going to make mistakes. And if we had a manager like Corberan, for example, I definitely wouldn't take 15th or 16th or anything around that sort of vicinity. But because we got Michael Carrick and he's, again, still quite an unknown manager for us. We don't know too much about his philosophy. I just think, especially with this team as well, where the depth isn't great and the midfield isn't great, in particular in terms of options that we have, I think, for me, kind of combining that, the way that we've been playing this season as well, I would take a sort of safe 15th position. Well, obviously, that's not where I want Boro to finish. I do want us, like Tom said, to finish as high up the league as possible, but yeah, especially in this league as well. It's crap this year, so you never know.
Okay, then. Okay, well, let's move on to the Zach Steffen Praise and Place then, because the Praise and Place is sponsored now by Zach Steffen because of his positivity in that post-match interview. But the Praise and Place is the place. I'd like to give praise to players, staff, Dana's tattooist, Tom's wig from last night.
My tattooist is getting it, isn't she? Ramsden in Middlesbrough, by the way. Free promo.
Free promo. Tom's masseuse, Graham Daniels hairdressers. Anyway, we'll do any praise and place. You just give us a name and we'll praise it in the praise and place. But who gets the position this week, guys? Who gets your place? Tom, who is your nomination?
I'd probably have to go with Riley McGree and Chuba Akpom. I thought both of them played really well yesterday. I think McGree in particular, he hasn't played well this season. I could probably count on one hand the games where I've come away and thought, you know what, McGree's had a really good game there, and he was put into the team yesterday in a new role, took his chance. I thought you could see again from my vantage point in the front row, pretty much an eye line level with him running forward in the second half. He was absolutely knackered. From around the 70th, 75th minutes, because of all the sprint he was doing on the counter-attacks when we were breaking, and how involved in the play he was getting. He ran his socks off yesterday, and fair play to him. I thought he did really well. And Akpom, as I mentioned, I thought he was great yesterday. I've got a goal, and then in that number 10 position, which we've not seen him play before, carrying the ball well. Slight criticism is I think he could have released the ball a bit earlier at times, but carried the ball well and drew fouls quite often, which I think if we're going to carry on with 4-2-3-1 and playing Chuba in that number 10 role, I think that could be a pretty decent asset for us, especially if we're going to start shooting off free kicks now as well.
Okay, then. Dana, who gets yours?
Yeah, Akpom, I thought he was brilliant in that first half in particular, and he did fade in the second half, but it was to be expected because he worked really hard. He is a good blend of physicality and, as Tom said, ball carrying ability, and I thought he did really well up against Ben Whiteman. He drew 5 fouls in that game, and in this game week, only Casey Palmer of Coventry won more fouls than him. He got 6, so yeah, I thought Akpom did that role really, really well, considering that I don't feel like that's a position that Akpom's really dabbled in too many times, maybe when he was a youngster at Arsenal. But yeah, he was brilliant. And I'm really happy for him, because he was, he was sort of cast aside to go back to Greece at PAOK. And I don't think any Boro fan really expected him to come back. And he's come back and he's got a point to prove, and he's proven that point so far. He's been a really effective forward for us, and yeah, I'm really happy for Akpom.
I think, yeah, it's a hat trick for Akpom in the Praise and Place this week. Unfortunately, it doesn't get the sponsorship for next week. Zach Steffen's Praise and Place will remain for the foreseeable future. But yeah, I think Akpom for me was sensational yesterday, and hopefully just he continues his good form in the coming weeks. But just before we move on to Hull, I just want to quickly mention the Motor Neuron Disease Association. We are still raising money for our charity this year. We're trying to hit £3,000, and it is probably the last episode of Motor Neuron Disease Awareness Month. So this is why we've had the podcast blue for the month. And if you had and donate a tenner, that could help fund an information pack for someone who has recently been diagnosed with MND. But also the money we've generated already, we've raised well over 750. We're just shy of £3,000 at the moment. So that's absolutely amazing. But that in itself is helping fund an MND expert researcher for a week. And then also, if you want to help us further, we're working with Teesside as well. It's have loads of Boro Breakdown merch, including the Malt Curse, some Boro Breakdown themed hats, a Boro Breakdown themed mug, and there was a Tav mug until it got sold. So that's why we introduced a Malt Curse t-shirt. But also with that as well, we've got some really cool merch as well, and a shirt as well, which is on Dana's wall if you are watching us on YouTube, which is very, very cool. And Tom wore it yesterday, but he's still yet to see us winning it.
No, I have.
Oh, no, you have, yeah.
Was it the Birmingham game, maybe? But I worked it out on the way at the game yesterday. I've seen a win, a draw, and a loss, and I've seen 2 losses in it. So it's time to wash it, really, and never wear it again for a match.
and never wear it again. Okay,
find a new lucky shirt.
Yeah, or we could wear the blonde wig, Tom, and that could be the lucky wig. No, I feel like if no one's in our Telegram chat, you probably will have no idea what that means. But we could post it. Who knows? But yeah, maybe the lucky wig, Tom, with the lucky eye patch. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Well, speaking of eye patches, let's talk about Hull then. Let's go to Hull then, because Liam Rosenior is expected to take over Hull in the coming days, but won't be in the dugout for Tuesday. Andy Dawson's currently in interim charge after they lost 5 in a row under Shotter until they got sacked. So a little bit of insight on Hull then. They've moved to more of a 4-2-3-1 system over the last 8 games. They used to be in a 3-4-1-2, which was very similar to Boro. They're a team that's really struggling to create at the moment, with their XG being below 1 in 12 out of the 17 games this season. So creativity is a bit of an issue, but defensively as well, 32 goals conceded already this season, which is the worst in the Championship. But if you want something for your coupon, I would recommend this one. Middlesbrough and Hull, a 3rd and 5th. So Hull a 3rd, Boro 5th. I think I've got other way mixed around. Sorry, it's Boro 3rd, Hull a 5th for conceding first within the 15 minutes. So maybe a goal within the first 15 minutes might be something you want to put a little pound on. But now it'll happen. We're actually very, very low, both of us, for that middle section in the first half. So maybe something for that. Who knows? But in terms of players to watch, Jacob Greaves, I think naturally will get the pick, because Boro are after him so much in the summer, and you can see why. Really good progressor of the ball, good defensively as well. But he has been playing left back over the last few games because of Callum Elder being injured with a hamstring injury. But Elder is expected to make the return to the bench, so we might see Greaves on that left hand side again. Seri in midfield, that double pivot with Ryan Woods. Seri is actually a very intriguing player, because all of his stats, he's in the key stats, he's in the high 90 percentiles for recovering, ball progressing, and he's where he's quite limited in some aspects of like more of like the advancing third bit. So what you'll see him, he'll try and play through the thirds, get the ball at line and try and get them playing. So it's really key for Boro to have a specific press on him. But up top, Pelkas on that left-hand side, look to maybe cut in and try and play that through a ball for the centre forward, and we'll see, because the main centre forward, Oscar Estepinian, is currently injured, I believe. So we'll see who the player up front. But I think with the way Boro are playing at the moment, and they had that 4-4-2 in the last game, I think it's going to be really effective for Boro for trying to infiltrate that centre and half space, because you do keep protected, but also you have that compactness as well. But what you'll see with Hull, they'll try and play through teams. So if you try and get the ball out wide to them, they don't create too much, but we might see that actually happen a little bit more in this game if Boro try to be a bit more advancing. But see, for me, I think the press is really important. Try to really press on Seri, try to stop the limited progression of play. I think that's where Boro might have a bit of joy, especially with that counter press that we've seen against Preston. That's where I think one of Boro's goals may come from. So, predictions. Let's talk about them. What we predicted for Hull, because this could be anything. Dana, what is your prediction against Hull?
I'm worried about this one, I'm not going to lie, because whenever we go to Hull when the chips are down, we always seem to capitulate. And we've actually lost our last 3 games against them. And when it comes to our record at Hull, we haven't beaten them since October the 31st, 2017. So I'm a little bit worried, I'm not going to lie. Just to add to a few stats that you mentioned there, Hull have conceded the most penalties in the division with 4. So maybe a penalty there for Boro, I'm not so sure. Who would take that, actually? It would be Muniz, right, if he's playing, because Paddy McNair is usually our penalty taker, but if he's not in the team, then he can't take it. But anyway, irrelevant. Or it might be.
Akpom took the last one, but Giles was very disappointed that he didn't take it. So maybe they've made up. We'll see that.
Interesting.
But... has to be.
Did you shoe falls off again? Oh, that was funny. I'm gonna go with. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna go 2-1 Hull. I'm sorry. I can only see that. I'm glad they don't have Malik Wilkes, though, because he always scores against us, doesn't he, when he's playing for Hull? So I'm glad he's not playing for Hull anymore.
The reverse malt curse psychology, I like it. Tom, what are you going to go for?
You know, this is based on absolutely nothing other than a feeling I got after the match yesterday with how I thought we'd improved. I'm going 3-0 Boro. I don't know. I really fancy us to win on Tuesday for some reason.
Okay, then.
Me and Tom are like yin and yang in this episode, aren't we? We're like,
I feel like I should just go for a draw, just so like one of us gets it right. So I'm going to go over 1-1 draw. Both goals in the first 15 minutes, and that'd be happy days. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really difficult game for us. But saying that, Hull of I mentioned they've been struggling to create. But you never know with Boro these days. We'll have to see which Boro turns up, I think. But I'd love to see a win. A 2-1 win would be fantastic. But I think 1-1 draw is kind of what we needed. Something just to build on and get the first point on the board for Carrick, and then progress from there. I think we will. But guys, that's it. Thank you very much for joining me as always. And to listeners and viewers, thank you very much for listening and watching us on YouTube as well. But stories leaving Boro in the deep. DEEPDALE at 21st in the tier, but Boro going to the Tigers, needing a much needed win. This has been the Boro Breakdown podcast, and that was our Boro Matchday Chatter in a pod.